country whose government is devoted to putting you behind bars.
I'm an American and a Jew. The Germans wanted to destroy both of those things. So I wanted to destroy the Germans. And I did.
Okay, but why was it never in the press?
They could never own up to the fact that somebody like me could be capable of doing any good in this world. See, I believe this world is made of shades of gray. It's never black or white.
So you never felt compelled to just set the record straight and say Meyer Lansky, patriot?
I think you found the title of your book.
I'm asking you the question.
I never felt the need back then.
Why?
It was currency between me and the United States. I assumed that if I did favors for the government, they would always honor my loyalty.
Did they?
We haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, David.
The US has really messed it up in Afghanistan. You see, first of all, they tried to look for a military solution in Afghanistan when there never was one. And people like me who kept saying that there's no military solution, who know the history of Afghanistan, people like me were called anti-American. I was called Taliban Khan. For anyone who objected to this way of, I don't know what the objective was in Afghanistan, whether it was to have some nation building or democracy or liberate the women, whatever the cause was, the way they went about it was never going to be the solution. So when they finally decided that there is no military solution, unfortunately, the bargaining power of the Americans or the NATO forces had gone. When there were 150,000 NATO troops in Afghanistan, that was the time to go for a political solution. But once they had reduced the troops to barely 10,000, and then when they gave an exit date, the Taliban thought they had won. And so therefore it was very difficult for now to get them to compromise. It's very difficult to force them into a political solution. So because they think that, they won.
Welcome to the 16th episode of the Revolutionary Star Season 2 for the year 2021. This is Superpower, broadcasting live and direct from Herat, Zimbabwe, to the comfort of wherever you are right now in our global world. Today, comrades, is Sunday, the 15th of August, 2021. And today we are going to be talking about regime change, my comrades. This is part 1, regime change. Lessons that Zimbabwe can learn from Afghanistan. When the United States breaks something and can't fix it. When being US goes wrong. It's pretty much what this is. The United States of America and its Western allies are regime change agents. And we want to explain using Afghanistan as an example. As you are well aware, Biden has just announced that he's completely withdrawing. As we are speaking right now in our podcast, Taliban is on the move, my comrade. They are about to take over Kabul. Maybe in the next month they would have taken over Kabul. Kabul right now, we have the United States Embassy, Canada, UK, all of them. They are sending their soldiers not to defend the citizens of Afghanistan for 22 years. No. They are there to evacuate their diplomats. Remember that when we are talking about who always believe that the Western interest is always in their best interest. As again, we said, today, here at the Revolutionary Star, we are going to be talking about regime change. Lessons that Zimbabwe can learn from Afghanistan. This is what we're going to be talking about today.
In Afghanistan, where the Taliban has captured 3 more major cities, they've now grabbed control of 13 of the country's 34 provincial capitals in just the last week. In the last few hours, Lashkargah city, which has seen some of the worst battles for control since the end of July, has fallen to the militants. They're also in charge of Kandahar, the country's second biggest city. US intelligence is suggesting the fall of Kabul could be just weeks away.
So, this Thursday, comrades, on the 12th of August, Herat, Afghanistan's third largest city, fell to the Taliban. and it only became the 11th provincial capital to be captured by the Taliban ever since the United States decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. Albeit, let me just throw it out there right now, comrades. Donald Trump was the one who started this process. But Ianga told it on the correct page, because Donald Trump had already been stating that going into Afghanistan was a mistake to begin with. It was an emotional jerk that they did. So this is not about whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. Vakafanana, as we've been continuously telling you in our podcast, foreign policy for the United States cuts across all the political parties within the United States of America. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. It's all about U.S. interests at the end of the day. So, on Thursday the 12th, Herat, a city in Afghanistan, fell to Taliban. Tichitara Ipabo, before Herat even fell, there's another capital city for that, for the Ghazni province. It had fallen earlier on in Thursday. So Maskata, later on in the evening, Herat then fell. But before that, the capital of the Ghazni province had fallen, whereby the governor himself had negotiated with the Taliban so that he could leave. Right? He ended up being arrested when he got out by Afghan forces for being a traitor. Right? Why am I mentioning this? 22 years the United States has been expending resources within Afghanistan, comrades. 22 years. And the mantra that they were using was democracy building, nation building. That is a bunch of bullshit. That is regime change. It's classical regime change. They tried it in Vietnam. Afghanistan is their second time. They've been doing it for a while. And remember what I've been trying to tell you, comrades. This has got nothing to do with whether or not it's a Democrat or a Republican. Because we can go right in and talk about Libya. Libya was decimated because of Obama. Under Obama, let us not forget that under President Barack Obama, that has got the most assassinations that have been done in Africa. Drone strikes increased under President Barack Obama's reign. Team ya Barack Obama, your foreign policy, the National Security Council, State Department, and then also Army, who are all these guys are experts at drone warfare. Drone strikes in Africa right now. This is Biden's team as we speak right now. The head of the State Department right now, Secretary Blinken, is a regime change proponent. He doesn't say regime change. He says democracy, nation building, peace efforts, and all of that. These are all catchphrases. These are dog whistles for regime change. What does regime change mean? Regime change is that we want to make you in the model of the United States, or somewhat what we want the United States to be. Even though the United States has its own problems, their statement in the United States is, don't look at what we do, but look at what we say, because we also strive for that, but we are in a better position than you. So here we go. Afghanistan. No, this is all in relation to here in Zimbabwe, how we should learn about this when we are looking at our diplomacy, right? The Taliban, as we're speaking right now, is now controlling 65 to 70% of Afghanistan. After 22 years of the United States being in Afghanistan. And the funny thing about the United States being in Afghanistan, they had the Russians to learn from, but they still did that. So we now have the United States sending an additional 3,000 troops to Afghanistan just to help evacuate some of the personnel from their embassy. Canada is doing the same. UK is doing the same. And Taliban. As much as you may hate it, because the Taliban were always made to sound as terrorists, but don't forget, Tongo Gara was named a terrorist. Machel at a certain time was a terrorist. Mandela was called a terrorist. Mugabe was called a terrorist. ED was called a terrorist. At some time, when a person is fighting a war, he will be termed a terrorist. The better media juggernaut can dictate the pace of the narrative that is being constructed in whatever situation it is. This is what we have right now. But while this had been going on, comrades, the Taliban correctly assessed that the momentum would always be on their side. Beg Richapera sooner or later. The Taliban had figured this out. Beg Richapera sooner or later. It was only a matter of time. They've done this several times. They've done it with the British. They had done it with the Russians. They had gone through civil war. And now they were dealing with the Americans. But one thing remained constant. Ground. Younger ground now, they knew their ground. So they systemically interpreted everything they were doing, right? And here is where we find ourselves as we speak.
We take a look back at Washington's record of meddling in elections across the globe. By one count, the United States has interfered in more than 80 foreign elections between 1946 and 2000. And that doesn't count U.S.-backed coups and invasions. Former CIA Director James Woolsey recently joked about the U.S. record of meddling overseas during an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that
CIA.
now, though? We don't mess around in other people's elections,
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks.
The list of countries where the U.S. has interfered is long. In 1893, the U.S. helped overthrow the Kingdom of Hawaii. 5 years later, in 1898, the U.S. invaded and occupied Cuba and Puerto Rico. A year later, it was the Philippines. Early 20th century interventions included Nicaragua, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, all in the 1910s.
In 1953, the U.S. helped overthrow the Iranian government. A year later, in 1954, the U.S.-backed coup in Guatemala, overthrowing the democratically elected leader of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz. Then in the 60s, the list grew to include, once again, the Dominican Republic, Indonesia, and the Congo. And that's just a partial list. Even with the end of the Cold War, U.S. interference overseas did not end. Next week marks the 15th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq to topple the government of Saddam Hussein. We now go to Stephen Kinzer.
Afghanistan has always had a history of issues, right? Before 1978, Afghanistan was a monarchy. It was being led by a man called Mohammed Zahir Shah, who had come into power in 1933, right? After World War II, both the United States and the Soviet Union used economic assistance to compete for influence within Afghanistan. After the United States established military ties with Pakistan in 1954, Afghanistan increasingly turned to the Soviet Union for support. In 1964, Zahir Shah convened what you'd call a Grand Council of tribal leaders to debate a draft constitution that would provide for a more representational government. Now let me break and stop it down here. It was a proper country. The geography of Afghanistan makes it difficult for you to have a central bureaucratic state system. So for a while, Afghanistan had been based on a feudal system. The chief and the sabukus had the most power, but mambo is in the king, right? But locally within their area, they ran shit. This is how Afghanistan has always been. Why has it always been difficult for Afghanistan to do this? Is because it's a mountainous region. Very mountainous, very impassable areas. So it's difficult for the people to intermingle. So this is where we have an issue that when Zahir Shah in 1964 decided to create a draft constitution, right? What Zahir Shah then did not do was that he allowed political parties to be there, but they were not allowed to organize, they were not allowed to contest, and basically they are so sparse that all over the place that at the end of the day it was just a for show type thing. Shah was overthrown by his cousin in 1973, right? Once the Shah was overthrown, the cousin, his name is Daud Khan, he allied himself with a faction of a party that was called the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA. This was a Marxist-Leninist party. This is around 1973. So same time this is going on in Zimbabwe. Hondo yauda kucha. Inotaka kunyatsopisa maybe 1975 to 1980, but in 1973, training chichichi ndo irikitika kuno. So as you can see, the Russians were everywhere. Marxist Leninists, the Russians angaripo pa ground. So this party had been formed in 1965. Right? So before the Russians come to Africa, vanga watoya mu 1965 tanga tichirina na ANC tanga sati atombotanga kufunga nezvehondo. 1965 is UDI here in Zimbabwe. So you're just trying to make you understand that these guys had been ahead of Nyaya Dzese the Jambanja before us. 1965, 1964 UDI. Ndio time yana Ian Smith. Ndio time yekuti 1963. Prior to that, we have ANC, ZAPU, as we said in our previous podcast, the bourgeoisie intellectual black Africans were still trying to be assimilated into the white society. So, from what I'm trying to tell you right now, what we have here is Afghanistan was actually ahead of political thought in how they moved. Set up situations, right? So in 1967, the PDA then split into two factions. One was called Parcham, right? Parcham means flag. This drew support from urban educated Pashtuns along with other ethnic groups and Povo. The other side was just generally Pashtun. Now, why am I mentioning this? Pashtun is an ethnic group. Pashtun is like Shonas. Now, for you cadres here who may not know what's going on with Afghanistan, the Pashtun, let's look at them as Shonas, right? So imagine the British come here and let's say Mashonas actually are found in both Zimbabwe and Mozambique, right? And then the British just cut a border, Pakati Papo. So this is why the United States and all these other countries have always been having a hard time, is because the Pashtuns can always move from Afghanistan into Pakistan. They have Pakistani citizens, but ihamadzavo angori maborders akangogadzirwa ma-arbitrary borders akangogadzirwawo zvawo, and they've been there since the demarcation of Africa, whatever. They've been there since the World War II, but it doesn't exist kwavari because hama dzavo dziri kuPakistan and they both have the last name. These are Pashtun. They are the majority found in Afghanistan. Of course, there are other people besides the Pashtun. We also have the Tajiks, the Hazaras, and the Uzbeks. Uzbeks, you can see why Russia are interested. Ma Uzbeks are not fan of Russians. Kuna ma Uzbek are Russia as well. So, this is Afghanistan as we are saying. After that, so after gaining power from the Shah, Dawood Khan tried to marginalize his own party and tried to make himself become a king. Again, it didn't work. Civil war then started out. He got killed. After he got killed, another party came into power. After that party came into power, a lot of assassinations happened. We're not going to go into too many of the details, but a lot of assassinations going on, right? Pakistan all this time always pays attention because as we said before, the Pashtun side that is in Pakistan is a minority. But in Afghanistan, it's a majority. So Pakistan has to pay attention. Why are we, and I'm going to give you an example of here in Africa, we can find a situation like this, comrades. So, negotiations now to end the war in the 1980s, where Soviet Union pulls out. Civil war had been going on all during the 1970s. Russia comes in, right? Because remember, PDPA was a Marxist-Leninist party. Russia came in to try and quell this stuff. It got bogged down in there. The United States came in, seeing an opportunity to make the Russians expend a lot of money, since it was the Cold War at the time during the 1980s, and that's exactly what happened. So what then happened after all of that? The Soviet Union, aka Russia, then just decided to move out, and it left. After it left, civil war happened again. Civil war, imagine it was happening on an army that was politically motivated and a religious front. The religious front is the first time we're seeing the Taliban, right? Taliban takes control of Herat in 1995, thereby cutting the land route connecting the Islamic State of Afghanistan with Iran. Taliban Masalaf, right? Religion. This is what the Taliban is. So, after about 1995 to 1997, by the civil war and civil strife, the Taliban then renamed Afghanistan the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And Mullah Omar assumed as the commander of that area. While they were there, there was a small area that was still controlled by Eurocentric or politically motivated people who were on a Marxist-Leninist type of bent, but after a couple of years and backbiting, that fell off, and then Mullah Omar took over from this. So this is where we have it, comrades. Why am I mentioning this little brief history? This was just cliff notes. It's because I wanted to make sure that you understand that Afghanistan, if there's one thing that the people of Afghanistan know that has been passed down since 1933. Please note what I'm saying again, comrades. Since 1933, the one thing that Afghans have always known, ihondo, vani vejambaji. Whether they like it or not, gunfire, gunshots, and anything to do with war and killing is part of their lives, right? Now, they have never known a time where development took place that could actually try and expound or expand all these years of just brutal hardship that they've been going through, right? So here is where we find ourselves. So 2000, when the United States had an attack on their soil, they resulted in an emotional response where, since there were training grounds for bin Laden in Afghanistan, they decided to attack and run over Afghanistan just to prove what we can. Once they were in, they were bogged down. They had completely decimated everything that was there. But once they were there and they were bogged down, they couldn't just move in. Nation building. This is where that word nation building started coming through. Nation building is just another catchphrase or a dog whistle for regime change. And what is regime change? Well, regime change in its basic and in its most popular form is best understood as simply the replacement of one regime by another, right? It connotates the change of a system by another. Regime change may be the result of an internal or external dynamic, but it's a reality that many states where incumbents are forced to vacate political office. That's pretty much what it is. Atikufarra system yako, tulaku visa system yako, toisa imwe system isiri yoyo regime change. That's it. So right now, what the regime change system is democracy. Wakanzamuna chiti nation building. Regime change is neither good or bad. It's just the people who try to use the semantics to make it sound whether it's good or bad. But what it really is the United States saying, atifarire your political system. Yes, fuck your sovereignty. Fuck the way you guys think. But since murikudzikirira vanhu ava kwedu ku America hamudzikiriri vanhu vakadai, so we want to change your system. But they don't say regime change because it sounds authoritarian when they do that. So they use catchphrases like nation building, democracy, and so forth. Note, comrades, democracy is not the Bible. Democracy has been turned into being a good thing. No, democracy is a model of how to distribute power in a nation. Chete. It has its good and bad sides to it. Yakafanana ne any model. So when you look at democracy, yakafanana nokutenga a Honda Fit or a certain type of car. There are many other models you can use. Each model has its benefits and its disadvantages, right? However, the West has termed democracy to make it look like democracy yafanana ne Bible. If you don't believe in democracy, hauende kudenga. This is where we find ourselves, where regime change has been couched on a moralistic perspective used against smaller nations. So we have small states such as Zimbabwe that have to be especially creative to forge alliances and play one superpower against the other in order for them to survive. Because big powers are always trying to look for regime change machinations, which will influence whatever that big power's long-term interests are in a geographical area. They don't care about Zimbabwe. Never have. It's what is benefiting them regionally, because they just want to maintain their hegemony. That's it. Let's not try and make it that America is a great Satan or UK is a great Satan. No. Their foreign policy is based on their long-term interests in a certain geographical area. If they have got no geographical advantages there, they take it out. Why are they leaving Afghanistan, comrades? There is no long-term benefit for them staying in Afghanistan. The only reason they went into Afghanistan in the first place was because it was an emotional reaction, right? They could have done strategic strikes into Afghanistan. They could have used a proxy to come into there and do the exact same damage that they did with the US Army. But they couldn't even do that because Afghanistan is surrounded by actors which they themselves have problems with. Iran is there as well. Iran is one of the neighbors to Afghanistan. China is a neighbor. Russia is a neighbor. Pakistan is a neighbor. You see, and to add to that, America then decides to just move in there because, Twin Towers has been bombed. Did they have a right to retaliate the attacks on Twin Towers? 100% they did. But did it mean invading Afghanistan? No, it did not. And they showed that they were willing to spend 21 to 22 years in Afghanistan when it was really unnecessary. Why am I trying to say this? I'm trying to say this is because when you see the Tendai Bitis and the Nelson Chamisas going to the United States thinking that inviting a fox into a hen house helps Zimbabwe's long-term interests, it's foolishness, tomfoolery at its best, comrades. Yes, we may hate our government. Government, we all know it. ZANU-PF itself has got which we all know, and we are always trying to fix it. But it is better than inviting a fox into the hen house. Once you invite the fox into the hen house, it will be very difficult for you to ever remove the fox. Better to deal with your issues mega pachenyu mogadzirisana ngationesane tisati tashedza kurawa because my big boys. Here's another thing, Kada. Yes, we are Africans. We are proud to be blacks, but we need to realize that we live in a global world where real politics actually is the name of the game. We as Zimbabweans are too small in the global world as political actors. We are nothing. We are a pawn on the chessboard. Therefore, when you see our own politicians knowing that we are pawns, try and go and ask for help from a country like America, where they are asking for nation building and democracy. It will always come to bite us in the ass. It will. Same with China. Yes, China is helping us, but the difference with China is that China does not really want to be involved in how a country runs its politics. China doesn't care whether Murushansa democracy, kana Murushandisa Marxist-Leninist, or you like Chinese model. What the Chinese are more concerned about is dollar cents. So Mimi as Africans or black people, if you decide to sell your country or to leverage it, right, or go bankrupt, resources, that's your fault. It's not China's fault. China is just doing what China does. China vanotenga zvinhu and vanoda kumaximize, but ivo vanoziva kuti kumusha kwedu kuChina, right? It's tiri kuda gold, tiri kuda fiat currency against the United States. So you can't blame China, but China is a better devil because China does not involve itself in the sovereignty of a country, one. Two, it does not involve itself in the machinations of the political intrigue of a country. Two, America, UK, they do that. Why? Because they are former colonial powers. They have been imperialists since the 1800s. China is a new boy. Russia is a new boy. Russia didn't even get anything in Africa, imagine. Right? But it was an imperial power of Dar. But China is a new boy. China was never an imperialist colonizer in Africa. Maybe if we're talking about today in the Asian countries. But when it comes to the United States and the UK, they still have that residual result of being former colonial powers. They think they still need to control the way a country determines how you run yourself. Zagafanana, you going to your brother's house and tell him how to have sex with his wife. This is what America does when they come and say, we want you to nation build in such a way or to do democracy in such a way. Yes, maybe you are helping your brother by buying chicken because he lost his job, or you're helping with the ZESA bills, or you're helping with the hydro. But it doesn't mean you now tell him how many kids he should have with his wife, or how he has sex with his wife. This is what nation building is. It is determining everything in the house, including how you have sex with your wife. That is what it is, if you want to put it down in Kadas. So, why are we saying this here at the Revolutionary Star? We are not saying this because we're trying to encourage you to vote for ZANU-PF. No, it's got nothing to do with ZANU-PF. It's about whether or not you agree with ZANU-PF. Asking for help by punishing your fellow citizen and asking for help from people who are miles away from Zimbabwe will never help you in the it will help you in the short term. When we are talking short term, the minute you see a BT fly to the State House, short term yake ya kufunga is 5 to 10 years. America never makes foreign policy which is short term. They are looking 50 to 100 years. 50 to 100. And my policy yokuti munhu anenge agadzira policy yoga anonyora bhuku, because he'll be dead by the time his policy comes to fruition. His grandkids will be the ones saying, no, mudara wangu akagadzira this policy. Angaona kuti Africa was heading in this direction, and for the United States to stay as a superpower, it has to do such and such and such and such. So it's very surprising that you see opposition politicians be capable of leveraging the future of Zimbabwe based on political gains they want to make within the next 10 years. ZANU-PF, on the other hand, political power, so you will never see them sell Zimbabwe away or their sovereignty, because now economically ndopane problem. That's why you see a lot of people have been complaining about the rise of Chinese people here in Zimbabwe and so forth. That's an argument we can have. We will have a podcast discussing my China. But remember, that's our problem, comrades. Our problem. Isusu sema Zimbabweans. Because turikubvumira kutengesa nyika. It's way better than regime change and democracy. Because that one is a systemic issue that will affect us for the rest of our lives. You get what I'm saying? So this is why we just thought we'd talk about it. Because despite the European and American consensus on punitive measures against Zimbabwe, these powerful countries have never succeeded in roping the United Nations, African Union, or Southern Development Community to do the same. Why? It's because we are a small country, but we need to play our position. Up to this day, many ZANU-PF officials are barred from traveling to European countries unless on special occasions. Why is that? The EU travel ban on Zimbabwe leadership was meant essentially to prevent them from accessing European capitals in a way that they are isolated, so that they would miss out on any economic benefits that may come back to Zimbabwe. They've been trying to cripple Zimbabwe for a long time. Zimbabwe has instead identified other big influential powers that can align with it so as to avoid disastrous isolation. Again, we're going to go back to Afghanistan. Why are we mentioning Afghanistan in all of this? Is because we need to be vigilant, comrades, about regime change. This is just an introductory to regime change. We're going to start talking to politicians and interviewing them so they give us what they think. But in essence, regime change is, I don't like your system. I want you to use this system. That is what the United States, the European Union, and UK are espousing. China, on the other hand, is saying, ina nabasa ni system yako. How much can you sell to me? Indakadagavaka dam, what will you give me if I build that dam? Right? Okay, can I marry that gold mine? How long can I hold on to that gold mine so I can recoup my losses? That's China. Now, that's a different argument. You know, you can't blame China for that. You blame the administration of the country. Same China. Right now, ZANU-PF can say, tiri kushandisa China nokuti anabiti vakati blokesa kuchi ku US ne ku UK. So hatina choice. Totoshanda ni vanhu vada kushanda nesu. Vanhu vanoshandika navo. This is where you see that opposition does not understand what it means to be an opposition. The betterment of your country. You need to be a patriot first before you are a politician. And we will go deeper into this. We're going to interview MDC people. We're going to interview ZANU-PF people and see more understanding of what regime change. We wanted to bring this right away here at the Revolutionary Star. That's why it's a short podcast. But it's because what's going on in Afghanistan. You know what? Now, before we wrap up, why I was going to mention Afghanistan is that there is another country in Afghanistan, Zimbabwe. That's Rwanda. Rwanda, the area between Rwanda, Congo, and Uganda. A lot of people from Rwanda have relatives that are in Uganda, have relatives that are in Congo. Right? But vakapedzerana vega. Once the French pulled out all those ethnicity and atrocities, they left because they were like, right? Their long-term interests did not benefit them from involving themselves in there. Rwanda, right now, the president there, Kagame, he was trained in Uganda. They were being helped by Museveni, right? And Museveni was also helping fight forces in Congo, and Zimbabwe was on the other side helping the incumbent, who was Kabul. Vakapedzerana pachao, vakapedza. But right now, I can tell you, with the Rwanda soldier, you don't play with the Rwanda soldier. Not because they be better trained or they've got better equipment, but mentality yake ndeyo hondo. Vanhu vajaira jambanja for a while. Here in Zimbabwe, let's be honest, our troops may be very well trained, but jambanja kashoma, except maybe for the special forces or the elite teams vanombotumidzirwa outside the country for missions we do not know. Right? The only official mission that we know right now recently was the one that went to Mozambique. Right? When Westerners leave nations to their own devices, vanopedzerana pachao. Sometimes it's good to step in when atrocities are being done. Right? Let the UN do its job. Send in a peacekeeping mission from the UN. The United States has over and over again proven that it will always look out for its best interest, even if it means breaking something. They will come in and break something, say that we're going to fix it. And when they fail to fix it, like a child, like an actual child, they will leave it alone and move on to the next thing. Case in point, Afghanistan. The Taliban has known that for a while. 20 years Afghanistan, Taliban yakachikoka zvayo. Ichigorwisa zvayo iri makomo nemumacave. Achisekwa vachiwanzirwa comedy shows. Kuti these guys live in caves. But ivhu redu iri. This comes back to what is going on here in Zimbabwe. Ivhu kuvanhu. Ivhu redu iri. Same thing as Taliban. You can call them terrorists as much as you want, but there in the country that they live, that is their country. Ivhu redu. Pavanekorosa border vopinda into Pakistan, vanenge vachiona hama dzavo maPashtun. They don't see a Pakistani, they see a Pashtun. This is something that Westerners do not understand. And you diasporian cadres who don't understand chivanhu chenyu nokuti wakazowana degree ravo kubva kuHarvard, waakukwanisa kutaura neka-accent kako koku-UK kana koku-US, you are in for a sore surprise if you come back here and think you can change somebody ari kugara kumarirangwe kana kuti kucholocho. No. Some things never change, no matter how well educated you are. So this is what it is, cadres. We had to come back here. We're going to be doing this. Regime change is going to be coming out a lot in our podcast. So we just had to do an introductory briefing. And luckily enough, this just came on our laps. As we are speaking, nyika yakutorwa nevanhu vacho vainzi materrorists. Materrorists iyo ainzi akabhombwa iwo akadovadzoka vanhu vavo kupinda panyanga. They are right now, as we speaking right now, it's Sunday. They are heading towards Kabul. Herat, Ghazni yatorwa. Varmunzira. 20 years later, after Bush came into Afghanistan. Don't forget Iraq vakabuda futi ka. Libya vakabuda futi. Syria vakabuda futi. This is all through Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden eras. All of these countries I'm mentioning. Everywhere they've been going these past few years. Vanongopinda vongoti ga vongoratidza matoys avo, and a lot of people die. A lot of economy is wasted. Generations are lost. Then they withdraw. They withdraw. That's a militaristic complex as it gets, cadres. Abuskonati business here. Ingori business. So why would Zimbabwe ever risk involving themselves in any type of situation nokuti iwewe unokwira ndege as an opposition leader wobhururuka kuenda ku-state house kunokumbira kuti uyai kuZimbabwe mubvise Mugabe? Cadres. This is why we have started this podcast. We're going to be doing a lot more. If you disagree with what we're saying, please Hit us up. We will be discussing. We will have MDC politicians where we interview them. We will have ZANU-PF. But our stance right now, unless we are proven wrong, is that regime change cannot happen in Zimbabwe. It will not benefit us. It may benefit for the short term. Southern America has been suffering for centuries because of America always doing regime change. Regime change after regime change. Haiti, up to now, comrades, has been suffering in outside influences. But again, this has been Comrade Super Cabral. Coming up, signing out from Harare. We hope you have a great Sunday. Roger out.